Not good.
Good evening. Welcome to our presentation on the Virginia Satir Family Therapy Model. This is our group presentation, and we hope that you enjoy it. Virginia Satir is often called the mother of family therapy. Her model, the Satir model, or the Satir Transformational Systemic Therapy Model, is something that she developed and many therapists still use today. Born in 1916 into a complicated family life, this is probably what led her to become interested in the family dynamics. Her father was an alcoholic and her mother was a religious fanatic, and she grew up in a very tumultuous household. She originally worked and studied as a teacher, then went into private practice, and then she began her career at the Illinois Psychiatric Institute, where she began working with families. And this is where she really began to hone in on her therapy of not dealing necessarily with individuals, but how individuals are affected by their family dynamics and how those family dynamics can often play into a person's pathology. As a student of experiential therapy, she found more focus on the individuals and their emotions and less on theories and interactions. And because of this and her not so being focused on pathologies and theories, she was often highly criticized for her paying attention more to a person's emotions and how they relate to one another and how those relationships can impact a person's livelihood. She wanted families to understand that their emotions are instruments. She believed that the problem of an individual extended to the family. She also developed a Satir model of change, which included the joining stage, the chaos stage, which is often the hardest. Families often, find confusion in this stage and have a difficult time trying to regulate their emotions and find out, where the real problem is. Virginia Satir often focused on that coping mechanisms were more the issue, not necessarily the problem, how a person copes with the problem and how the family, interacts with those coping skills and interacts with one another really, can determine a person's ability to change. Her approach to family therapy, um, she had 4 basic rules: an emphasis on hope, so people can feel positive, really connecting with their emotions, strengthen and enhance their coping skills so patients can learn how to see things differently, focus on coping, not problem solving, and help people realize they always have the ability to make their own choices and have the ability to be well. They may not have realized that they have the skills, and that was her focus on trying to help people learn to determine that they do have these skills and how to pull it out and teach them, how to use these skills with their coping mechanisms. She wanted to help guide them to understand family dynamics that led them to make the decisions that brought on the problems, communication patterns, and how to change them. Communication was extremely important in her therapy model. Virginia also had an emphasis to the sensitivities to the different demands of everyone's culture, which really makes this theory really applicable to many different cultures and diverse families in our world.
Key terms in the definition: family dynamics, the interactions with the family members that impact or affect communication and their behavior; communication, how individuals communicate with one another; implementation of learning how to express feelings effectively, listen, resolve conflicts in healthy ways; self-worth, the value people see in themselves; examining beliefs about self-worth and learning how that affects interactions help people take an active role in their life. Boundaries looks at how individuals establish limits with others. This includes setting clear personal boundaries, respecting the boundaries of others, and learning how to resolve conflicts when the solution goes out of control. In time, helping individuals manage their lives better by setting priorities and managing time effectively so they can accomplish more in less time, so they can enjoy life more. The 5 core tenets of the Satir model of change theory. Number 1 is the status quo. People remain in status quo due to its familiarity. Number two, the unknown, helping clients feel uncomfortable entering the unknown, the introduction of a foreign concept slash behavior. Three, chaos, learning how to exist and be comfortable in chaos. Nothing can change without going through the chaos. Be sure of the growth potential and help families see it. Number four, integration. Practice what you are learning. If you practice enough, new patterns and thought processes will emerge. Number five, the new status quo. Patients will help realize it's possible to have a new normal based on new practices becoming established. Patients now believe in themselves.
So we're going to talk about our goals of treatment here through the model. There are six main goals. First being that of enhancing communication. Should really emphasize clear, honest, and congruent communication among family members. One major goal of that was to help family members express feelings and thoughts directly, and help reduce defensive patterns, resolve misunderstandings, and really just overall improve emotional connection. The second one was to increase self-esteem and personal awareness. She believed that family issues are often rooted in individual self-perception and coping strategies. The idea of the therapy was to strengthen each member's self-worth, helping them recognize their value and encouraging personal growth. This focus on self-esteem also helped equip individuals to work more authentically with each other. The third was to promote healthy family roles and boundaries. Um, it really explored family dynamics, including roles, rules, patterns, really everything that influences behavior. Some of the goals within this one kind of include clarifying roles within the family, establishing healthy boundaries, and enabling family members to interact in a flexible and more supportive way rather than kind of conflictual patterns. Next is to facilitate positive change and problem solving. She believed that this approach encouraged families to identify dysfunctional patterns and kind of replace them with more constructive behaviors. Treatment aimed to develop creativity, adaptability, and problem solving skills. Number five is to foster emotional resilience and support. The idea of this goal was families were guided to create a more nurturing environment where feelings were validated and supported, um, during stressful and transitional periods. This kind of helped, or sorry, this included helping members become more aware of their internal experiences and feelings, including kind of empathy and things like that. And last but not least, is to achieve congruence in family interaction. Congruence is kind of the alignment of inner experience when it meets outward communication, right? And it's very central to the model. It focused on promoting authenticity and integrity in those interactions and reduce the idea of masking with your family and people that you care about. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the role of the therapist slash counselor within the model. So the role of the therapist is to be warm and highly engaged and kind of a facilitator of all things growth. The therapist will take on the core roles of being an active role model, being clear, open, and direct in communication. The therapist will teach clients how to express feelings, listen, and ask for clarification. A detective for resources. The therapist will focus on finding inner strengths that the client may already possess and honing in on those strengths to help facilitate change. Number three is a co-facilitator. So kind of taking on that role of the co-learner, right? Kind of taking that step back as an equal partner to build a safe, trusting therapeutic alliance. And lastly is the idea of a guide, kind of helping clients navigate and uncover what lies beneath their behaviors by exploring the feelings, perceptions, and expectations.
So techniques and interventions. So coping stances, which are different communication styles. We have the placator, which is the person who pleases others at the expense of their own needs. The blamer, which is the critical fault finding of others to protect themselves. The computer, or super reasonable and overall emotionally detached. The distractor, who uses humor or shifts focus to avoid the real issues. And the leveler, which this is the ultimate goal of being authentic, directing communication, and where body language, tone, and words all kind of align. Um, so the personal iceberg metaphor. So this is an exercise in mapping out experiences across levels for surface behaviors to find deeper emotions, perceptions, and desires. This exercise is used to help the families find the root cause of their problems rather than just focusing on the observable behaviors. So, another technique is family sculpting. So, this is an active intervention where one family member is asked to physically arrange the rest of the family in the room to represent their perception of the family's dynamics and the power structures and the emotional distance that may be between family members. And this can be a really compelling intervention just because it gives the rest of the family insight into how that individual sees things. And then family reconstruction. So, this is a multi step experimental process where individuals safely re experience past multi generational dynamics. And the purpose of this is to uncover distorted beliefs, roles, and coping mechanisms. Uh, then we have reframing. So, this is cognitive and emotional interventions where the therapist offers an alternative, positive, or growth oriented perspective on a family member's behavior. So, a great example of this would be like instead of focusing on a child being defiant, instead it's focusing on, the child's uh, like need to want answers. And then lastly, we have temperature reading. So this is something that can be completed on a daily or a weekly basis. And basically, it's a family check in, and it's structured to create a safe space for new information, to build appreciation for one another, a safe space for complaints to be left, and a place for hopes. So it's a way to normalize communication among the family and build on their emotional intelligence. So cultural considerations. Uh, Virginia also had a big emphasis on taking considerations for people with different cultural backgrounds. To a quote from Chung and Chang, she stressed the importance of parents to teach their children to fit in with the requirements of family living, to balance their needs with those of others, and to fit into the demands of culture. Virginia was a big advocate that people should respect everyone and has equals regardless of their similarities and differences. Although Satir took different cultures into consideration when developing her model, it wasn't perfect and focused on the individual in some aspects of her hierarchical model differed from culture to culture, but there was some overlap. So another example of this would be in China, Satir's hierarchical model shared ideas and values of the Confucian hierarchy.
So, to apply one of the ideas that we went over earlier, with the different roles that members of the family play, according to the Satir model. And we want to apply that to the film What's Eating Gilbert Grape. If you look at the family, you would see that Gilbert would be the placator. He very much is self-sacrificing. He's not really paying attention to what he needs. He's not even really considering that his needs should matter so much when they do come up anyway. So he's really focused on everyone around him, making sure specifically that people like Mama and Arnie are getting what they need. And he's feeling the weight of that. Mama would be the blamer. She's the one who is not really thinking about how she played a part or is playing a part in their current situation. She, I'll get into this in detail in a minute, but she's feeling some low self-esteem and not focused on blaming her husband for leaving her and the oldest son, who's only briefly mentioned in the film, for leaving her as well. And she kind of echoes that throughout, but she's very much focused on shifting the blame away from herself and not taking that personal accountability. The irrelevant would be Arnie, because he doesn't really have agency, so to speak. He's just kind of going on the whims of his family around him. He is very much at the mercy of Gilbert and even Mama, honestly, for emotional support and physical support. And of course, his sisters. He's just not able to rely on himself or to take that step, unfortunately. And very similar for to Arnie is his younger sister Ellen. She is not really ever considered, even though she thinks, from her own perspective, that no one's listening to her, um, and that she doesn't really have the life that she wants, which might echo, her family, but no one is really giving her the time of day because Mama and Arnie are getting so much of the attention. And when she does make herself known, it's not always in the healthiest manner, unfortunately, and so that leads to fights, not even just with Gilbert, with just the whole family, and causes her emotional distress too. For the computer or the super reasonable, there's Amy, who's very much task oriented. She kind of looks at the logistics of the situation. She's kind of taking her emotions out of it. She's very much, how do we get stuff done? What specifically do we need? She's not so much taking care of anyone's feelings. She's not babysitting how Gilbert feels or how Arnie feels. She's just saying, okay, this is what's got to get done. So, Gilbert, either you do it or I'm going to do it. And that's what kind of plays into that role, is the kind of dissonance from the intellectual and the emotional. And then at the end, we have Becky. Now she's not part of the family, so to speak, but she does come into their lives through Gilbert. But she's this leveler because there's a lot more congruence for her and how she views her life and how she's actually living it, or from how she wants to live life and how she's actually living it. And she kind of helps establish this healthy communication system for the family to use. And you can see what a positive impact that has when you get the family to start considering what they want and how to live that way. So, what I looked at when analyzing the grapes, there was this article by Retman from 2016, and he kind of looked at the model and how it goes through this lens of personal growth. When you're working with a family, you want to develop their hope, you want to help them increase their view of themselves. So it's not even necessarily you want them to view their life as different. You just want them to view themselves as capable of making the changes that they want to make.
And acceptance is another big part of that because you want people to not kid themselves. Don't live in the past and say, "Oh, things could have been different." You want them to look at where they are now and just accept that where they are now can be okay. And you also want to make sure that each individual is being valued for what they bring to the table. You're not, you don't want them to wish that they were someone else, they were more like someone else. You want to help this family or any family get to a place of accepting that what they have that makes them special is worthwhile. So when we find them, they're all in this place of low self worth, low hope, um, not much acceptance of their situation. They're living in this very small town. And here we can see the family of Mama, whose real name is Bonnie, Amy, Gilbert, Arnie, and Ellen. And they're all dealing with this kind of stagnation and really focused on the familial duty they feel to one another. So, specifically, Gilbert and his two sisters are really focused on how do they make sure Arnie stays safe? How do they make sure that Mama is getting taken care of as much as they can? Because Mama has really spiraled with these low self worth feelings, and she hasn't left the house in years. And she's kind of, if you think about it, being uh, abetted, I guess is the word, by her children. Like she's allowed to live this way, and they've all kind of latched onto that feeling that life can't be better for them, and it's not even worth trying. Gilbert feels completely trapped in his life. He's really the primary caretaker of Arnie, like what we were saying earlier. He doesn't feel like he's even capable of achieving more, which is really why this uh, model would work so well for him because it really would tackle what's the root of his mental I don't want to say mental problem, but his presenting problem at the moment. He feels like he needs to ignore what he's doing and taking care of his family, which they all do, and they're just not communicating that. They're not being honest with themselves and with each other about what their wants and needs are. Oh, and on top of all of that is the fact that the oldest brother, he essentially abandoned the family, and that kind of put this taste in everyone's mouths that growing up, so to speak, taking life into your own hands, looks like leaving behind people who love and care about you. And it kind of made them all afraid to do that. And they say the same thing about their father, Bonnie's husband, who completed suicide before the film began. And the way that they talk about it is that he left them, he abandoned them, he disappeared. And there's not a sense of mourning that they don't have a father, like that's what they lost. They just feel like they were left behind. And it's the same thing with Bonnie's oldest and everyone's older brother. They feel like ignoring your emotions is the only thing that's going to keep them together, essentially. They've gone into this maladaptive practice, and it's only exacerbated the feelings that they might have had otherwise living in this small town. So when you're applying the model, you want to make sure that you're engaging them as individuals because they have not really been identifying themselves. To borrow a term from a different model, they've kind of become enmeshed in this family system. No one really sees themselves as, say, Gilbert or Ellen or Amy. They see themselves as this family. And they don't really see themselves outside of it. They don't see how they could possibly differentiate. And when you're using a Satir model, you want to make sure that you're tackling that head on. You want to give them the opportunity to say what they want to say what they maybe have been denying themselves. And I'll go on a little bit. So for working with the family, Retman goes on to say how that means demonstrating this healthy communication model. You want to ask questions, so to speak. So you want to say, "Hey, Gilbert, how do you feel about this? What would you change in your life? What do you feel is going well?" And if you give these people the opportunity to be honest, you would find that they would echo the same sentiments. And you want to let them know that change does not come at the expense of the people that they love. Despite the bad experiences, it does not have to mean losing loved ones, leaving them behind. It can mean that you're placing value on yourself and you can encourage other people to do that. And a good tool for that too, especially with this family, would be the personal iceberg tool. It's got 6 layers. Starts with behavior, coping, perceptions, feelings, unmet expectations, and longings. And as you might expect, the top of the iceberg is behavior, and then it would go down. So what would be buried deep underneath would be longings. And you really see that with this family, where each member is really longing for this kind of better life, and they think that that's unobtainable because they buried it so deep. And their behavior really echoes that, where they're just going through the motions. And you want to help them connect those longings and unmet expectations with their behaviors, because what you're really tackling is the incongruency there, that discrepancy between how they want to live and what would bring them happiness, to what they believe. And the Satir model can really help facilitate changing that. So when you use this iceberg model, you can apply it, go over with Gilbert, with Amy, with Ellen, where you are having them say, "Hey, what are your longings? What is it that you're burying deep? And then does that match with how you're acting?" And in this case, it would not, but just getting them to make that connection would be a huge step forward. Um, and the last thing I want to say that's not mentioned on the slide, just connecting back to what we were talking about with some techniques, maybe doing a family sculpture to kind of help them all visualize how their life revolves around Arnie and Mama, can be a powerful tool to help them see just how enmeshed they are. And recognizing that is going to be a big step with this family, and I think is definitely a place to start. And then as it progresses, just they'll recognize more and more about what their unmet expectations and longings are and what they can do to change that. And it really empower them to make those changes in their life. And then just our references. I think that's it.